I hate that I have to make this video. As you guys know, the trailer for Daredevil Born Again dropped yesterday, and in that trailer you saw this moment where you saw this character, and it turns out that this character is going to be the White Tiger, Hector Ayala. And this is the actor that's going to be playing him. This is Camar de los Reyes, and if you know anything about Hector Ayala, you kind of know where I'm going to go with this video, but I do got to say, rest in peace to Camar. This is nothing against him. He actually died not long after the shooting of Daredevil Born Again. This is actually his last live action role. But with that said, this is what Hector looks like in the comics. And you can find other times where his skin has been lightened and things like that, but he's mostly been depicted as a black Puerto Rican. So this is just another example of a character being whitewashed in the live action version, like America Chavez. Comics, live action, New Mutants, Sunspot, Cecilia Reyes. Casting Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul. I can't remember the actress's name, but a white woman as Talia al Ghul. Everybody jumps on here and say, well, Camar is actually Latino. Yes, but he's not a black, like, don't act like colorism doesn't exist. That's why in some instances there is a overcorrection of casting black and brown people with historically white characters, because black and brown people have been historically left out of narratives.
A lot of people don't actually care about comic book movies being good. Now, this conversation is really all stemming from a lot of the news circulating Cynthia Erivo trying to throw her name in the hat to be the MCU's new Storm. This was, for me, kind of like the nail in the coffin in regards to me really wanting to sit down and have a conversation about this and get a lot of the perspective from people that are watching this on YouTube as well on your thoughts. Because I feel like there's a lot of nasty rhetoric and narrative that is being put around that people are being very disingenuous on. Now, there are a few different ways I want to tackle this concept from, and it's mostly the issue of like fan casting and people being really hyper fixated on actors they want to having to be the characters they portray. They want to be portrayed, at least. One is going to be from the physical aspect, because, you know, that's the biggest thing that people are looking at. That will be the cultural background, because, you know, that's how they're going to match up as well there. I think that kind of goes hand in hand there. Next would be the person's closet in regards to the skeletons that they have there, because that's also a bit of conversation that people have in regards to this stuff. Now, first, in regards to the physical, I'm going to start with kind of discussing a little bit of what you guys saw in the clip that was played initially, being the aspect of colorism. Now, historically in Hollywood, I do know, and I'm very aware, me being a black man and seeing a lot of this stuff and being a nerd myself, I understand that colorism is definitely a thing. There have been a lot of different characters who have been whitewashed, or there's been a lot of lack of black and brown characters on the big screen, as well as the small screen being TV shows. I'm very aware. But one thing, as of the last like 5 to 6 years within Marvel, that you cannot say is that they haven't made an attempt to be incredibly more diverse in regards to cultural background, to sexual background, to a lot of different ways, from characters like Wiccan being introduced to there being a lot of different black characters being pushed to the forefront in Marvel, rather than be Sam Jackson's Nick Fury being pushed to get his own series, Falcon being chosen to be the Captain America of this MCU instead of the Winter Soldier, because in the comics both of them have been, so they had the option to pick, and they chose the black man to be first and foremost in there. For them to even recast the character of Wonder Man, who was historically a white man in the comic books, to being a full-fledged dark-skinned black man like Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. There's been a lot of these things. Even the Wakanda movie, Riri Williams getting her own show at some point in regards to Ironheart. There's a lot of different diversity that's being put there in regards to black people. And it's not even including the stuff when it comes to Shang-Chi, which I think is a little bit lacking in regards to Asian representation, but it's a whole different conversation that I need to have with people that are actually Asian. In regards to my people, I think it has been a big push to make sure that we've been represented within the MCU proper. Now, when it regards to colorism, then I think in this video that I think is being disingenuous now is that there is a small sect of people that feel as though that whenever a casting is put out, that this character needs to be as dark-skinned as possible. Now, would that be great? Cool, I'm not mad at that at all. But the thing I would like to put first and foremost over any of that is the acting ability there. I do feel like sometimes people, and a lot of the times people in regards to these conversations, will choose the aesthetic over the acting chops, which I know is something that's very subjective in regards to a person's acting ability, because some people will say somebody like, I don't know, The Rock will have absolutely no ability to act whatsoever. And some people will look at some of the roles he's had here and there throughout the years and feel like he just chooses movies in which he doesn't have to act. It's however you want to chop it up, but he's an extreme. But there's a lot of actors like that, though, where people will say, oh, he can't act at all. And other people will say, oh, he's an amazing actor. It's subjective. But in this case, in regards to stuff like the White Tiger from the Daredevil show, I feel like people don't also pay attention to the different versions of the character that have been out there, and honestly, who is being represented within those characters. Historically, if you follow my content and my channel at all, you know that I am a really big proponent of representation. I think like my first video on the channel, if not second video on this channel, was about representation with characters like a Static or like a Jon Stewart. These are like some of my favorite characters of all time. And I talked about how people need to see characters that look like them on the screen depicted. In me saying that, I do think we're getting to a point now to where people are taking that point to like an extreme to where only one specific type of Black person needs to be represented. I understand that there's this colorism war between light skin and dark skin people, but I get really annoyed when people act like there's only one type of Black person that has to be represented. We are not a monolith. We are not only dark skinned people with dreads. There are light skinned Black people too, especially historically, that have been just as influential and a part of our journey thus far. Stuff like that needs to we need to be every Black person, in my opinion, when it regards to film, we need to be looked at as a unified people. Now, how realistic that is? Probably not much, because people don't want to get outside of themselves and people want to just really harp on historical stuff and not try to push forward into a better tomorrow. It is what it is. In regards to stuff like this, if a character is biracial, and I think Miles Morales is probably a better example to look at here, he is a Latino and he is a Black person. Both of those sides of him need to be shown very, very authentically. And I think that's probably the best example of how you should do something like that in regards to the Spider-Verse movies, because he physically is portraying a lot of his Black side in regards to some of the way he wears his clothes, the music he listens to, and the people he hangs around, and kind of how he talks in general. And then you also see him interact with Black people within New York and his side of Brooklyn and where he's from. But you also see the Latino side of him, where he is speaking with his mother in a certain way. And you can honestly argue that that part of him is kind of neglected in some aspects within Spider-Verse stuff, because you don't really see him interact with other Latino characters or really utilize a lot of that, in my personal opinion. But again, that's a different conversation for a different day. And it's a conversation that I don't need to have because I'm not Latino. So I can't really, I can't have that conversation personally. In regards to the colorism aspect, I think you need to let that go. And I think to use Miles Morales into another springboard into the next thing I want to have a conversation about in regards to the cultural background of a character, I think when it comes to this fan casting stuff, people get it twisted where they want to have an actor who is 100% culturally like matching everything this character has. Moving to the main character discussion that we were talking about with Storm, people want a character who is from Egypt, Cairo, like Storm is from, but also want her to be very familiar with New York, because Storm is a African immigrant who grew up in Harlem, New York. And having a person that fits both of those things, one is like very difficult because you have to find an actor that fits both of those. And secondly, there's a whole bunch of other things that we'll get into that you have to have matched up with that person. And it makes it very difficult. I think people, in regards to this conversation, need to learn to let certain things go in regards to how this character is portrayed in regards to the actor and the background matching up. Could you find an actor who is African that can understand the culture of Cairo or Nigeria, that can also understand how Harlem, New York works, or at least portray that? Yes. Could you find a Black woman from Harlem, New York that's a native New Yorker that understands how African culture is depicted and she can embody that? Yes. Is it possible to find all these things in one person? Yes, it's possible, but incredibly difficult. In me saying this in any way, it's not me expressing the sentiment of they should just not try. Yes, when casting in general, you should try to find somebody who can embody all these different things. But for a character who is so layered like a Storm and has been around in many different iterations for a lot of different people, it's very fucking difficult to find somebody to embody all these things. Because on top of that too, let's say you find somebody from my perspective or your perspective that fits all these things, somebody else is gonna say they're missing something else because the version of Storm they grew up seeing in the comic books or the animated series is different from that person. Because Storm has been a mother and a nurturer and a lot of other stuff, she's been a warrior and a lot of different other stuff, it's very difficult to find a version that has all these things in one. Now, not the only version of Storm, in my opinion, that I can think of that embodies all these things, especially on the comic side of things, is probably the Storm run going on right now, written by Muyiwa Adeyemi, who is a Nigerian writer, and he is doing a great job of embodying all these different things of Storm in these different versions and put him into one character. You can also argue that Storm kind of has the same sentiment in regards to the animated series and embodying all these different versions of her. But I think that this comic book run is the thing that does it the perfect. Now, that being said, still finding a person that fits all those things culturally is incredibly difficult to do, even more so with the physical stuff. And I think this is what we're going to get into in a lot of the things that really made me want to speak on this, the physical aspects of Storm. Storm is a tall, slim, but athletic Black woman who has a accent, slightly has a certain way about her and a presence about her physically. Like, I can't even really describe it. Like, it's almost like, I think the only person I can think of I've seen acting on screen that kind of has that aura to them is Angela Bassett. And I think honestly, in a perfect world, we can rewind time or find a younger version of Angela Bassett and put her in today's time, and she would be the perfect casting for Storm, because she, in my opinion, embodies all these different things. But even then, some people may disagree because they feel like she's missing some things in regards to maybe she's not dark-skinned enough. I don't know. But in my opinion, she's the perfect person for it. But because she's so old now, and again, she looks amazing, but she is significantly older now, she can't play this character, nor can she be this character for the next 10 years. Because keep in mind, Marvel, when casting for a lot of these characters, unless the character is an old person, they're probably going to look for somebody younger to play this so they can use this character in movies and shows for the next decade plus. Because this is something they're not looking at in the short term. They want this to be a new saga going forward in the MCU. That's what they're building towards. So you have to find somebody who is young, fits all the cultural things that I described, fits all the physical things I described, and even then it still may not be enough for a lot of people. So all this to say, essentially, because I know I've kind of given a lot of stuff going up until this point, there's never going to be a perfect fan casting for any character, especially Storm. So people, I just need a lot of you to kind of just give leeway to a lot of the decisions being made in some of the casting and judge this stuff off of the acting ability first and foremost. You can critique, obviously, the casting and somebody not fitting that person perfectly, and I think that's warranted if it's like something like the gods of Egypt, to where all these Egyptian gods who are supposed to be Black, or at least darker skin because they're in Egypt, being casted as like full-on Caucasian people. I can understand that level of outcry. But if they cast somebody like Cynthia Erivo and she doesn't match your physical traits that you're looking for in a Storm, cool. But the nasty talk about how she looks like a skeleton or X, Y, and Z, that's just something I don't want to see that in the world. I really want to believe that we are better than that. And I know a lot of this stuff is just the internet and how toxic the internet is. And there's probably gonna be a lot of people that are toxic on the internet in these comment sections for this video. But please, let's be better people about this. Are there better castings than Cynthia Erivo? Yes. She personally wouldn't be my pick. But if they picked her, give her a chance. Give these actors a chance and just not just tear them apart. Now, when an actor is in public favor, oh my God, there's no better casting in the world. I've seen stuff like, I think Aldrich Hodge is somebody that's being, at least on the internet, I don't know how true it is in Marvel, but on the internet, people have talked about him being the new Black Panther and the new stuff going forward. I've seen a lot of positive reception with him and people kissing his ass. And again, I think he's a great actor as well. That's not me saying he's not a great actor. And other people would like Keke Palmer throwing her name in the hat to want to be Rogue. I've seen positive reception around that. When people feel like you fit, and I think a lot of this stuff, again, all comes down to the physical. I know I broke down a lot of different stuff from comics to culture, but for the most part, people at the end of the day are only caring if this person looks like this actor. And at that point, bro, just cosplay, because you're not as concerned with the narrative and the product overall being amazing. For me, at the end of the day, I need these movies and this content that these characters are going to be adapted into to be good quality things that are well acted and well written. If you are only hyper focused on if the actor behind the depiction matches up everything that that character needs to be, I think you've lost the assignment at that point. You've lost the mission. At the end of the day, these characters are going to be depicted in a way that, hopefully, in Marvel's point, because I think they've done a solid job of this thus far, they're going to try their best to give you somebody that fits the best parts of that character. And in regards to the movies and the comic books and their relationship, keep in mind, and this is for people that are really hyper-focused on the comic accuracy side of things, with Marvel especially, usually they change the comic books to meet the particular versions of the characters that you see in the movies. Like, they change comic books to match that stuff. So I wouldn't even really hyper focus on that, because what you think is the norm now may be a different new norm down the line if they cast somebody different and that person has a different take on Storm that is drastically different than anything else, but people love it. They'll change that in the comic books, I promise you. Or the editors will request that from the writers to make them more like this. I promise you that's how that works in the future. And the last thing, because I know I'm kind of rambling here at this point, that I wanted to speak on, and it's kind of a sensitive topic, and I do understand why some people would have this feeling around the actor of Cynthia Erivo playing Storm, is her skeletons in her closet in regards to how she may or may not have talked about African Americans in the past. I'm not here to go down that rabbit hole of evidence because I don't care that much, to be quite honest with you, but I do understand it's something that has been a point of contention. If we are going to harp on actors' skeletons in their closet in regards to that being a big proponent of why they should or should not be a certain character, y'all do not remember how a lot of this stuff happened with the MCU initially being built. Just turning the time clock back to the first Avengers movie, hell, even further back to the first movie that kicked all this stuff off, being the first Iron Man movie. When they announced that Robert Downey Jr. was going to be Iron Man, first off, people didn't know who Iron Man was, because keep in mind, a lot of the Avengers were C-list characters and people didn't really care to that extent. But people knew at that point, Robert Downey Jr. had a very, very questionable history in Hollywood, from the drug abuse to all kinds of other stuff he had going on, and people were not thinking highly of that casting. But lo and behold, over time and giving him the ability to change his life and also giving him the ability to give a really unique and amazing take on the character, people can't think of anybody else to play that character. Like, literally, I don't care who you get after the fact. It could be Tom Cruise or Leo or whatever whatever the perfect actor is at the time. I promise you, for comic book fans and for fans of the MCU, he will never live up to Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man. It just won't. And that wasn't the ideal casting at first. Now, in retrospect, it looks like the ideal casting because of what he did, but initially it was not. I promise you it was not. That, to me, if he is not the prime example of why you should give people a chance and not judge them by their skeletons in their closet, I don't know what is. Hell, even besides somebody like a Jonathan Majors, who, again, before all the case stuff he had going on in the court, again, I don't care about the specifics of that because I'm not a lawyer. I'm not getting into that. But before all that stuff happened, he could do no wrong and was looked at as the perfect King the Conqueror casting. Even in the shitty Ant-Man movie, people saw him as a bright spot in that movie. People give people a chance. Please, just give people a chance, and let's not be very disingenuous and nasty around a lot of the conversations being had around these fan casting, and let's just be more casual around fan casting in general. Like, people take things like that very seriously, and I understand why. Because at the end of the day, these characters mean so much to us from a personal level, from a cultural level, and they represent who we are. And some people have built up a lot of their livelihood around the examples that these characters set for us. Like a Spider-Man having great power, meaning you need to have great responsibility as well. Things like that, I understand why. But at the end of the day, you got to be more open-minded with some of this stuff, because your favorite version of this character in the comic books is never going away. The animated series is never going away. Past movies you may love, they're never going away. And the way that character is in your memory will always be there. Please just have an open mind, because at the end of the day, sometimes these movies right now are going to also be for the next generation of kids going forward. And whatever version of Storm or Rogue or whatever other X-Men you pick out, that may be their person. The example that I usually try to bring up and I always love to speak on is the aspect of Miles Morales in the MCU. He is, for a lot of youth and for a lot of people, their Spider-Man. He is their Peter Parker. People know of Peter, but they're not going to look at Peter in the same way they look at Miles, because he is so important to them. That was their quintessential developmental canon event moment for them, seeing Miles Morales on the screen and him as Spider-Man. People for a whole generation will only see him as their #1 Spider-Man, and Peter will be second to that. That in any way doesn't take away Peter's legacy and him being Spider-Man for however long, like an abundance of decades, but it's going to help continue to create more nerds down the line that love these things and write more amazing stories for their generation and what they perceive. So at the end of the day, again, this is just all me saying, please have patience. Please give a little bit of wiggle room and give things a chance. Be good people at the end of the day. I've rambled a lot, so if this video makes any sense and you guys want to see more content like this, let me know in the comment section below. And also let me know about liking the video so that more people can get to see my videos in general recommended to them. If you hate it, cool. Let me know in the comment section below. I got some thick skin. I will not be moved at all by the insults because of how the internet just works. But again, y'all, this has been Captain Diesel of Captain Diesel's Dojo. Be good people.